You'll have to stay better tuned for that. Now, this year marks the 200th year anniversary of the birth of Charles Darwin, as well as the 150th anniversary of his book On the Origin of Species, which means you're going to hear an awful lot about the man over the next 12 months. And it's apt that my next guest has provided us with a handy guide to all the things we ought to know about the great British scientist, and other details like just how Cartman from South Park fits into the theory of evolution. Mark Pallen is author of The Rough Guide to Evolution. Mark, good morning.
Good morning.
There is a bit of an obsession with Darwin at the moment. Is this book aimed at making us sound like we know everything about the man, even though we may not have had a notion up to now?
Yes, I think so. I've tried to cover his life and bring out some of the things that people didn't know about him beforehand, things that they didn't realise. I mean, one of the problems is that Darwin has become a kind of icon, but the icon is of the old man with the big bushy beard, a kind of grandfather figure or even a Father Christmas type figure. And people forget that he was once a young man, and that when he was young, he did all the sort of things that young people did.
Ooh, what did he do as a young man?
Well, when he was at Cambridge, he said he was a bit of a waster. One of his friends drew up a comic coat of arms for him, which had a wine barrel on it, some tobacco pipes, some beer tankards. It's clear that he spent most of his time as a student drinking, smoking. There's a friend of mine, John Van Wise, even been trying to find any evidence as to whether he did any one-night stands. He's found no evidence that Charles Darwin did that, but his cousin, William Darwin Fox, there's some evidence that he was up to no good in the evenings.
Is there? I often wonder how these people come up with notions like this, 200 or 150 years after the person has passed away, whether they had a gamey eye, as they might say, in parts of Ireland. Did he have an eye for the women?
He did have an eye for the women, yes. I mean, when he was on the Beagle voyage, in his notebooks, he records that the ladies of Buenos Aires were the handsomest in the world. And when he was in Lima, he said he couldn't keep his eyes away from the ladies there. He said they were like mermaids.
How do the ladies respond to him, do we know?
Well, there's no evidence that, I mean, his grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, was supposed to be quite a womanizer. I don't think there's any evidence that Charles Darwin was actually like that. He did have, he courted a lady called Fanny Owen when he was a young man, before settling down to marry his cousin, Emma Wedgwood. In fact, it's quite funny. My mother read my book, and the only comment she made on it was that my first daughter's named after Emma Wedgwood, and she said, well, if Darwin had actually stayed on and courted Miss Owen, would you have called your daughter Fanny instead? Which I thought, only mothers can come up with those kind of comments.
And would you have, Mark?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Your obsession with Darwin might have ended at that point, at the baby naming ceremony bit of things. The wider public at the time, when the theory of evolution, when he first came up with it, how do they respond? Well,
there's a misconception that Darwin single-handedly destroyed religion or attacked religion. In fact, at the time there was a lot of undercurrents going on of religious doubt, the so-called Victorian crisis of faith. And people were starting to analyse the Bible and pick it apart and saying, well, maybe these stories aren't historical truth. There was evidence from geology that the world was older than people thought. So Darwin did make a contribution to that dialogue, but he didn't single-handedly achieve anything. It was very much part of the zeitgeist.
And the whole business, because I guess a lot of us came to had the notion that he came up with the theory on the Galapagos Island. That's actually not strictly true.
That's right. Well, there's no evidence that there was ever a kind of eureka moment where he was on the Galapagos and suddenly thought, oh my God, it all makes sense now. It's the first doubts that you can see, the first notions of evolutionary change that you can see in his mind are recorded in his notebooks on the journey back from the Galapagos, where he starts to think, well, you've got these different kinds of birds and different kinds of animals on these islands, and the islands are in clear sight of each other. This is a bit strange. Why would a creator have made separate birds, separate tortoises, and so on for each island? But that really doesn't gel all together until he gets back into England and starts to write his notebooks in the year or two after he comes back.
What other myths have persisted about him over the years then?
Oh, well, I think there are many. I mean, one that's currently being debated is quite vociferously is whether he actually deliberately delayed publication of his work on evolution because he was concerned, even scared, of the impact it would have on religious belief and on society in general. There's not really much evidence for that, or any solid evidence for that. It's a notion which has grown up in the last few decades. And if you go back to Darwin's time, to his autobiography or the biographies of him at the time, obituaries, nobody said, "Oh, Darwin delayed for nearly 20 years. Isn't this strange?" I think he was just a very busy man. He was a meticulous scientist. He wanted to get things right, and he wanted to finish one piece of work before he started work on the next. And so I think there's really no notion at all there that he delayed deliberately because he was so scared of the religious consequences.
He came to Ireland, Mark, at some point. When was that, or where did he come to?
He came in 1827 at the age of 18. He'd just finished his studies at Edinburgh. In fact, his studies at Edinburgh turned out fairly disastrous. He really didn't like medicine, which is what he was studying. He saw various botched operations. And just in the spring after he left, he went on a tour of Scotland and then crossed over into Ireland and visited Belfast and Dublin. I used to live in the north of Ireland in Donaghadee, and I used to speculate at the time that perhaps he'd passed through Donaghadee and stayed at Grace Neal's or whatever. But sadly, I've not been able to find any documentary evidence of what he did, what he saw, where he went, where he stayed when he was in Ireland.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even the fact that he came here, we can at least lay some claim to him,
but
if that's the case.
It'd be nice to have a plaque somewhere in Dublin and somewhere in Belfast to say Charles Darwin stayed here, but
true.
That's something for future historians.
I know. Well, you wouldn't know. We would still maybe take the opportunity now to erect a plaque, even though we don't know exactly where he was, but just to say he was here in this country at some stage after his studies.
He was, yes, indeed.
What's the situation with Cartman and South Park and the theory of evolution?
Well, the theory of evolution has become very prominent in these cult TV programs in the US. South Park, Simpsons, Friends, Heroes. A lot of that is because of this very heated debate between evolution and creationism, which is, in fact, it's not a debate among scientists or academics at all. It's something that's played out in the media a lot. But that has filtered over into these cult shows. In fact, my favourite is from The Simpsons, where they have a kind of trial of Lisa Simpson for teaching the theory of evolution in the classroom, and created some very interesting bits of comedy there. Yeah,
so maybe it's not all bad that the media have jumped on the bandwagon. Well, listen, exactly. The book is called The Rough Guide to Evolution, and all you ever want to know about it, or if you want to sound knowledgeable about Charles Darwin this year, because you're going to hear a lot more about him, it seems. Mark Pallen, author of that book, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Weekend Blend. Fintan Duffy is here with the news headlines.
Orla, thank you. The top stories on Newstalk. €3 million worth of heroin has been